All right, welcome to another brand new edition of Park Sportsbook Presents Stick to Hockey Live, another week of hockey talk. We'll do it today, and we'll do it Thursday at 1 o'clock as well as Stick to Hockey Live continues. G's podcast with Harry Mays coming up tomorrow, and all presented by Park Sportsbook. Sam Carchidi will join us in just a couple of minutes to talk about a long career as a journalist, a long career covering the Flyers, and a new venture, and much more. We'll talk about players that he's covered, kind of favorites and maybe not so favorites, and a ton more. Talk about this season and a lot to get into as the Flyers are riding a 7-game losing streak once again. Winless in 10, 7-game point streak, now a 7-game losing streak. Unbelievable. But let me tell you about Parks first and foremost. Download the app on your iPhone or your Android. Real easy to do. Get involved in the action. This is not, the good thing about technology is it's easy to use even for, people that aren't technologically, advanced. And the good thing is when it comes to gambling, this isn't old school anymore. It's not just money lines and spreads and all that stuff. No, it's way more than that. It's in-game props. It's season props, futures. It's same-game parlays, live play-by-play betting, first to score, last to score, player performances. It's all there and all easy. Just a little tap on your phone. That's all it takes. And it's a lot of fun. And if you don't have a feel for a game before the game starts, that's when you go play-by-play betting. You got to get a vibe of what's going on in the first period of a game or first half of a football game or first quarter of a basketball game. You go, okay, now I have a little bit of knowledge of what this team is tonight and what they are against this opponent tonight. And boom, that's when you can maybe jump on some action as well. So make sure you download the app. And for new customers, no promo required. Just deposit, and your first bet is risk-free up to $500. Real simple. Your first bet, if you want to make your first bet tonight, you find something you like on the Flyers Isles game, boom, pop it in. Or maybe you like another game around the card tonight. Or maybe you want to get in on the football action coming up this weekend. It was a wild weekend this past weekend in the NFL. So download the app and check out all the details there. Parkscasino.com/PA. You can go online and check them out as well. And make sure you give them a follow on their social channels because there's a lot going on the social channels. At Park Sportsbook on Twitter. They're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. This show is on all those formats as well, with the exception of Instagram because they don't do live shows. But there will be clips there and highlights, and you get all the great stuff from Rich Gannon and Eddie Alvarez and Mike Quick. There's a lot of great stuff there. Natalie, Sam, everybody providing great content. And there's daily specials and all kinds of stuff. So make sure you check it out and follow them on all the social channels at Park Sportsbook. Again, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And you'll see this show and past episodes there as well. You can peruse through the catalogs. And also this show available, obviously, on iTunes and on demand after the live performances. And you can go back and check out any of the past episodes if you are using iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or Google Play with all those things. Make sure you subscribe. Leave us a rating and review as well. That'll help other Flyers and hockey fans find Park Sportsbook Presents Stick to Hockey Live. So a ton to get into on this episode because, like I mentioned off the top, the Flyers now have lost 7 straight games. And, this is after a 10-game winless skid that was misery personified for Flyer fans. And then a little bit of hope with a 7-game point streak, which actually got them within a point of the wild card. Now, Detroit was holding that wild card at the time. It wasn't Boston yet. Boston had missed a bunch of games because of COVID and postponements and everything that goes along with it. They got within a point and was like, okay, for a 10-game winless skid this early in the season to have survived that and be right there, we'll take it. All things considered, without Ryan Ellis and the injuries and the Kevin Hayes double, all that stuff. Tough schedule. You go, okay, we're good. But since then, since the 7-game point streak, and that ended in San Jose on the last game of 2021, a 3-2 overtime loss, that was the last point they got prior to the losing streak. They've gotten a point in this losing streak, 2 points actually. They had that overtime loss to San Jose that I just mentioned, then lost to the Los Angeles Kings 6-3, lost to the Anaheim Ducks 4-1, lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins 6-2. then lost to San Jose in Philadelphia on January 8th, 3-2 in overtime. That was the Hurdle hat trick game. Next game was postponed against the Carolina Hurricanes. And then Boston last Thursday, a 3-2 loss there because of a slow start and a David Pastrnak hat trick in that one. And then the game on Saturday night at Wells Fargo Center, the 3-2 loss against the New York Rangers, where once again, 10 plus minutes it took them to get their first shot on goal. And, when you see stuff like that, knowing that slow starts are a killer, you just can't have that. And you kind of scratch your head and go, well, why? How could that happen? How could there be a slow start in that game on Saturday night against the Rangers after the slow start in Boston bit them in the butt? And it really bit them in the butt. And you come into that next game against the Rangers at home, and it's a slow start once again. Now, I broke down some of the numbers about slow starts in the pregame show of that Flyers-Rangers game that night. Now, the Flyers this season, now, if they score the first goal, they've been good. Look, the team that scores the first goal is pretty much always in a good situation. Not all the time. Some teams come back, like the Rangers, when not scoring first this season, were 9-9-2 this season. So that's pretty good. If we're not scoring the first goal, if you're coming back and you've won 9 of those games and gotten 2 more to an overtime loss, you'll take that. That's a good trait for a team to have. But the Flyers this season, when they've scored first, they've done well. 11-2-5. Now that technically there's 5 overtime loser points there. It's 11 wins and 7 losses. But the Flyers in that situation have been good when scoring first. But when the opposition scores first, as was the case against Boston, as was the case against the New York Rangers, they're now 2-15-2 when they don't score first. That's unbelievable. Now, like I said, the Rangers, when they score first and going into that game, they were 15-1-2 when scoring first. So combine it. The Rangers were 15-1-2 when scoring first, and the Flyers were, at the time, 2-14-2 when not scoring first. It had to be a point of emphasis from the coaching staff to get off to a better start, to not put yourself in a situation where you're vulnerable. And they came out and they didn't get their first shot on goal till after the 10-minute mark of the game. It's a head scratcher for me. And it's not like, they had good pressure and were getting opportunities, but just didn't hit the net, but had scoring chances. None of that. It just didn't look good. After the first period, they ended up getting tied just a couple minutes later in the 11-minute mark of the first period. And, they come out of that first period tied. And, you go, okay, all's well that ends well. Actually, they ended up having a higher possession number in that first period. They got outshot, I think it was 12-6 in the first period. But it's chasing the game. Now, you could go, okay, well, they score the second period, 1-1 going into the third. And about midway through the third period, Cam York scores his first NHL goal. And now they're leading the game. So they overcame it. Yeah, they did. But you can't keep giving up the first goal because it makes you chase a game. And it's not a recipe for success. And the numbers bear it out. I just gave them to you. 2-15-2 when not scoring first. It defies logic. That was one of the things coming into the season Chuck Fletcher talked about when he made a lot of the changes. He said, since I've been here and allegedly prior to me getting here, the team's been a slow starter. And we got to fix that. And they came into the season and they started out first periods much better than in the past. But old habits die hard, and we're starting to see those problems creep in once again. And now all of a sudden, with that record of 2-15-2, and when you give up the first goal, it's as they say, not ideal, and it can't keep happening. And if you're playing an Islanders team tonight and tomorrow night, you can't do that. At Islanders, even though they're struggling this season under Barry Trotz, a lot of structure there. There's a lot of defensive structure, and they'll choke you out if you do not find a way to play from in front. Playing from behind against teams that with good defensive structure and that rely on their game defensively more than they do offensively will really thrive in that situation. Matter of fact, I'll look at their numbers, the Islanders' numbers when leading. Now, they've had a really bizarre year because they started out the season with a 13-game road trip while their building was getting done. And now that their building's done, they're back in it. They still just have never been able to get their feet under them all season long. Playing a little bit better, not tremendously better, but a little bit better. Now the Islanders, when scoring first, 9-4-4. Actually not that great of a record. When the opposition scores first, 2-9-2. I'm surprised it's not better than that. But the Islanders season's been a bit sideways. So I guess it stands to reason that they're in a situation where their numbers are going to be a little upside down from what they are. If we went back and looked at last season, I'm sure it would look far, far different for the New York Islanders and Barry Trotz's squad. But that being said, Flyers and Islanders tonight. Metropolitan Division right now has the Flyers sitting in the 6th spot. 37 games played, 13-7-7 is the record, 33 points. They lost 7 straight. They're 2-5-3 in their last 10. They're tied in points with the Devils, who also have 33 through 37 games. Devils do have 14. Their record's 14-18-5. And the Islanders sitting in the bottom spot with 28 points. So they're 5 points back of the Flyers and the Devils. But here's the rub. The Flyers and the Devils have played 7 more games than the Islanders. 7. Islanders have a record of 11-13-6, 28 points, but they are 6-3-1 in their last 10 games. So they are playing better. And, sometimes it's not who you play, it's when you play them. And you maybe wanted to catch the Islanders a little bit earlier this season as opposed to being a little bit later this season, because the situation with the Islanders, you get them when they're playing a little bit better, starting to feel good. They know they got the 7 games in hand. They want to get back into the mix. And they're obviously a team that at this point, back-to-back years in the conference final, everybody looked at the natural trajectory for a team like the Islanders and said, okay, if they've gotten the back-to-back conference finals, once in the bubble, then last year, then, it's finals or bust for the Islanders. But that 13-game road trip to start the season was no party for them. And they were all over the country too. It wasn't like they just stayed in the Northeast corridor. They're a team that, they could have played a lot of their games relatively close to home because of where they're located. Could have got a couple games against the Rangers, could have got the Devils, the Flyers, the Capitals, going up to Boston and taking care of it that way. But I imagine Lou Lamoriello actually asked for them to knock out a couple of their distance road trips as well during the 13-game road trip. In hindsight, maybe that wasn't the right decision for Lou Lamoriello and the Islanders, but it's one that he had to make, and they are where they are right now, but they do have the 7 games in hand. And when you look at the wild card standings right now and the chase for that final playoff spot, I don't know if this is a situation where in the Eastern Conference that we'll see a different team than the 8 teams that are sitting currently in playoff position in the East. Florida, Tampa, Toronto have the top 3 spots in the Atlantic. Then the Rangers, Canes, Caps have the top 3 spots in the Metro. And then it's the Penguins with 49 points through 37 games, and the Boston Bruins through 35 games with 46 points that sit in the playoff position right now. Detroit is the one team back of the Bruins at 39 points, but the Bruins have 4 games in hand on Detroit, and Detroit's not good enough to overcome that. Columbus, 36, but they've played 1 more game than the Boston Bruins, but are 11 points back. And right now the Flyers sitting 13 points back, and the Bruins have 2 games in hand. So that's just not an ideal scenario. The math has gotten really, really difficult for the Flyers. The math is getting better for the Boston Bruins, who are playing really good hockey right now. And they're a team in Boston that's kind of been there, done that. And they faced some adversity earlier this season, obviously because of COVID. Everybody has. Every team has dealt with that. But Boston's a team that you don't see them as one of those teams that could falter it away with just a little bit more than a half a season to go. And you just don't see any of those teams chasing right now that also could put themselves in a situation to track them down. You're going to have to play for the Flyers to get in at this point. We were talking about this the other day. I think Brian Smith and I think they'd have to play about .720 points percentage the rest of the way to get to that 100, 101 points. That's unlikely. I have to wet my palate. Sorry. We're waiting on Sam Carchidi. I don't know if he forgot or what's going on. Somebody hit up Sam. I just texted him. But when you look at points percentage, put it this way. If you want your team to be able to play at a 720 points percentage, there's only one team playing above that in the entire NHL. And that's the Florida Panthers at 750. Actually, there's a couple teams. Carolina above 720 at 743. Colorado's at 729. They're the only three. Then it's Tampa at 713, Toronto at 708, Rangers, Minnesota's up there, Pittsburgh, and Boston. When you look at these wild card standings, and you really got to go by with the disparity in games played, you really got to go by points percentage. That's how you can kind of see where everybody is kind of located right now. And when you look at the fact that Detroit's at a 500 points percentage, Boston's at 657. Columbus is at 486. Again, Boston at 657. Flyers at 446. To play a 720 points percentage is just so unlikely for the Flyers to be able to do that. And again, the schedule, the NHL schedule is always hard. You can always go, oh, tough stretch here, tough stretch there. It gets easier for like 2, maybe 3 games is probably the max. The NHL's a tough league. 32 teams. Yeah, there's some teams that aren't good, and a bad team can beat a good team on any given night, like Arizona beating Toronto last week, even though Toronto outshot them significantly. But it doesn't get easy. There's no easy spots in the schedule. You have the Islanders today and tomorrow. Then Thursday at Wells Fargo, Flyers will take on the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are sitting above them in the standings, and have some things going nicely for them of late. And then it's Buffalo on Saturday. That's Buffalo. I mean, you look at Buffalo, and it's Buffalo being Buffalo. I mean, right now, Buffalo's the third worst team in the conference, 11-20-6, 28 points through 37 games. But that's Buffalo year in, year out. And then Dallas coming up next Monday at Wells Fargo. And then the Islanders again. And then you get Los Angeles, the Kings, who are improving, Winnipeg. Then you get Detroit, Washington. This will take us through the supposed Olympic break. And then Washington, St. Louis, both good teams. Edmonton, scuffling, and Minnesota and Chicago. So there's just really no let up when it comes to an NHL schedule. And there's just not a lot of margin for error. So where this team goes from here, as we count down to, I guess, the trade deadline at this point, which I believe is March 21st, I know people really want the Flyers to start making things happen, making moves, getting things done. But it's not that simple. We want that to happen now. We want immediate action when things don't go well. But that wouldn't be the prudent approach for Chuck Fletcher. You have to get teams, multiple teams, involved in bidding for an asset. Because you're not in a situation where you're going to trade a player, say Giroux or Ristolainen, say Braun, guys on expiring deals. You don't do it now because there's no urgency. And the closer you get to the deadline, that's when teams start to get desperate because there's a deadline there. It's an end game. It has to be done by this time so you can get more teams involved, and desperation seeps into the equation. And as teams miss out on players that they were trying to get, then their desperation grows even larger. And the Flyers, we're going to have to wait into March for those things to happen and for a market to develop and bolster. Now, who's are the guys that they could trade? 3 of those guys I just mentioned, all on expiring deals. Giroux, Braun, and Ristolainen. Now, Ristolainen's a guy that I'd like to keep because of what he's brought to the table. I think he's been pretty good. The analytics versus eye test community had a knockdown, drag-out fight in the offseason. We don't need to rehash it. The numbers were what they were in Buffalo. But in a different role here in Philadelphia, in a second pairing role, that's been different for Ristolainen, and I think he's played pretty darn well in that situation. And a contract extension would have to be reflective of not a top pairing right side defenseman, but of a second pairing, a 3-4 defenseman. So I'd like to see them re-sign him. I think that he provides a physicality that the team lacked before he got here, and that has been an element that they've needed and he's brought, and not to the extent where it takes him out of position and out of plays and out of, his responsibilities as an NHL defenseman. So, but those three players in particular are three guys that could fetch you a return. Martin Jones could as well. If a team's looking for goaltending depth, he's a guy that was obviously a starter as recent as last year. He's a guy that, backstopped an NHL team to a Stanley Cup final with San Jose. So he's got a lot of playoff experience, and, you can't have enough goaltending because you don't want that to derail you if you're going to a third goaltender in the playoffs because of a couple injuries or whatever. We're hoping at that point that COVID's not part of the equation, but Martin Jones could fetch you something. You're not going to get a first-round pick for Martin Jones, but you can get something. And Braun's another guy on an expiring deal that you could get something for. But I think we all have to come to kind of grips here as observers, fans, analysts, and not let every game drive us insane, because that's what it's doing. Like, you see it on social media, and that's social media. That's the emotion zone. And we just fire off a tweet, boom, just, going crazy, emotion, and being a fan and not taking a deep breath first. But we got to come to some kind of headspace on how to deal with the remainder of this season, because we can drive ourselves crazy. As frustrating as the Boston and then followed up with that Ranger game and yet another slow start was, it's very difficult to, in that moment, when that game's happening or when that game ends and it's another loss, now 7 straight, it's very difficult to just try and be rational. You're mad. You're pissed off. And you're like, screw this. Fuck it. I'm going to send out a bomb here. But if we're going to stay sane through this, and, the people that are sanctioning a full-blown tear it down to the foundation and rebuild it, do you have the stomach for that? Like, the people that say that, I'd love to go back and look at their tweets, because there's a lot of misery in there. And there's no guarantee that there's a big pot of gold at the other end of the rainbow. You can't go, okay, this is miserable right now. The team's tearing it down. They've, devoided talent, and they're building up through prospects and picks and young players, blah, blah, blah. Knowing that, hey, in 3 years or 2 years or 4 years, that we're going to be really good, and we're going to go on this 5 to 10 year run of being a perennial team that can get in that cup conversation. There's no guarantee of that. None at all. There's too many teams that have tried it and it not worked. Does it work for some? Sure. Some people will cite Tampa. I say that's bullshit. You can't cite Tampa. They weren't just sitting there picking at the top of the draft and sucking for 5 years to get those players. They had good picks of players that weren't at the top of the draft. Now, Hedman was, but Kucherov wasn't. Braden Point wasn't even a first-round pick. You got the goalie. You got all these pieces. But that wasn't through tanking, and that wasn't through stripping it down. Look at Toronto. They stripped it down. Where have they gotten? Yeah, they're an exciting team. They got some really good talent, and they may end up being a team, and they may make us all eat our words. And the people in Toronto hope so. But you got Austin Matthews. You got Marner. You bring in Tavares on the free agent market. You've got a lot of good players there. But they haven't gotten out of the first round. Look at a team like the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, how many first overall picks did they have? Edmonton right now is in a situation, they're chasing the wild card in the Western Conference. Edmonton right now has 38 points. San Jose's got 42, so they're 4 back, but they do have 4 games in hand. But it's been a mess out in Edmonton, an absolute mess. When you go, they've lost 6 straight, by the way, 2-6-2 in their last 10. You look at Edmonton and you go, how, with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, some of the pieces that they have, how on God's green earth Have they lost 6 straight? And how are they not in a playoff position? Connor McDavid may be the most skilled hockey player I've ever seen put on skates. I mean, can you find somebody that can do the things that he does athletically on the ice? I can't. No way. I mean, the guy right now in 34 games is 53 points, and a teammate through 35 games has 54 points in Leon Draisaitl, including 26 goals. And that's not enough. That's not a team. Those are 2 players. And they got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who they extended in the offseason. Puljujarvi's been much better for them. They brought in Zach Hyman. They got off to a great start. They got Tyson Barrie, Darnell Nurse. They got some good players, but they're nowhere near a team that can get it done. And Ken Holland, I don't know what he's going to do out there. He's a guy that I would call if I was the Flyers, because not making the playoffs when you have Draisaitl and McDavid is not an option. I mean, that could be a destination for a guy like Martin Jones. Mike Smith's hurt again, hurt his hand or his thumb, I think, and he's out for a period of time. But their goaltending between Mike Smith and Mika Koskinen's not good enough. So maybe that's a place where you call and you start to have some conversations. Hey, what do you guys need? The desperation element for the Flyers is wearing off. It's going away. That bodes better in a trade situation. If you wanted to make a trade prior to Christmas in December, while the team was right there, you're at a disadvantaged trade position. Teams know that you need something to save your season. Now, when you look at the math, it doesn't look like it can be saved. So that changes the tenor of any conversation that Chuck Fletcher will have. It changes every element of it. So now he's in a position where he's going, okay, if you want to come after one of my players because now you're desperate and I'm not, let's talk. Because now the scale tips in his favor. And there are teams like Edmonton that would see pieces on this Flyers team and go, some of these pieces could help me. Maybe a change of scenery for a guy like Travis Konechny would get him going again back to pre-pandemic Travis Konechny. Maybe a guy like Travis Sanheim would warrant a huge overpayment. And you're not looking to move either of those guys per se, but you're not hanging up the phone, especially for a team that's got some desperation. Sanheim's an interesting one because he has a year left after this that he's under control, and then he gets to free agency. So a team making a trade for him goes, all right, I get 2 runs with him, and if things work out here, then I extend him. That's a good situation. It's not a stone cold rental, but there's also not a long-term commitment, and there's not a huge dollar sign attached to his contract. There's not a lot of term, and there's not a ton of money there. So that's an attractive guy that's on a non-expiring contract that could help a team. He's been much better of late. He's a guy that could provide depth to a team that needs D, and a D that can activate and give you some offensive elements. That's an interesting guy. I mean, there's other guys that fit that. I mentioned Konechny. I know that Elliot Friedman mentioned Ivan Provorov from the organization is trying to figure out what they have. When I look at his contract, I'm not looking to move him. I need to find the right partner for him that can stay healthy and a guy that can, put himself in a situation to be a top pair guy, locked down, that can play 26 minutes a night. We know that Provorov can do that. He battles. He wants to play every game. The only games he's missed are the ones that he was taken out for COVID since he joined the league. Played his first 403 straight games. I was pretty pissed that he couldn't get out there when he had an asymptomatic infection of COVID-19. But how this team moves forward is going to be, I'm telling you, it's going to be really interesting. And you got to figure out what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. You got to figure out what you want to be, and then your process to get there and how long that takes. I don't see a full teardown. I just don't see it because I don't see enough success in the NHL doing it. I haven't seen it pay off for teams. It's very rare that it does. So we'll see. But I mean, I think this team after March 21st will look different. Cam York can't go down. Can't send him down. He's going to be in the lineup tonight. And once again, and I'm trying to figure out who he's playing with tonight. Somebody tweeted Sam, Diabetic Derek, and said, "Yo, Broad Street Bull, Jason Myrtetus looking for you." Yeah, Sam's standing me up here. I hate to do it to him. Let me see if I can get these lines for you for tonight. I think I maybe screenshot them on my phone. So my son's calling me naturally in the middle of doing a show, of course. But Cam York, to me, can't come out of the lineup. All right, here's the lines. This is courtesy of Olivia Reiner. Flyers lines and pairs at morning skate on Long Island. Giroux going to center Farabee and Atkinson. Like it. Lawton centering Lindblom and Konechny. Hayes centering Van Riemsdyk and Mayhew. Bunneman centering Morgan Frost on the wing on the fourth line and Zach McEwen. Provorov and Sanheim. Sanheim getting bumped up to the top pair and will play the right side, even as a left shot. Braun and York are going to be together on your second pair, and Ristolainen, coming back from COVID, is going to play with Keith Yandel in this game. So that's interesting. And I could see a situation if Frost is going and the coaching staff goes, all right, he's buzzing a little bit tonight. Let's move him up. And you swap him out, obviously, for Jerry Mayhew. So it'll be Hayes, Van Riemsdyk, and Frost, and then Bunneman centering Mayhew and McEwen. But York's a guy that he looks so chill. We had a chance to talk to Darrell Williams, who is the Flyers assistant coach, was brought in this offseason before the game on Saturday against the Rangers. And we were talking to him, Tim Saunders and I, about York and about what he's seen out of York. And with the coaching staff, really, you can tell they like what they see because they're using him so much. They're putting him in the lineup in so many situations. But Morgan or Cam York, he's just so chill. And I asked Darrell, I said, is he as calm as he looks on the ice? Like, some people look calm, but they're really not, right? But he doesn't look like he gets the elevated heart rate, doesn't look overwhelmed, looks real calm, makes calm plays, doesn't look like the game's too fast for him and he panics. None of that. He just looks like a calm guy and a real chill guy and looks like he belongs. And he said, I'm getting to know him. I don't know him real well because Darrell wasn't here last year. And he's gotten to know him a little bit, obviously, this year. But he said, yeah, he's that kind of just real laid back, kind of quiet, but confident, but just plays a game that is real kind of simple and takes care of what he's got to do. So, is Sam there now? Oh, okay. Let me just tell Sam. I emailed you the link. Hit that up. So anyway, so it looks like Sam will join us here in just a moment. So yeah, York to me stays in the lineup. Frost stays in the lineup. Absolutely. I would not pull them out of the lineup under any circumstances for the remainder of the season. Unless obviously injury or something else. I gotta find what I can do to keep them in. I think that's why you see some experimentation with Sanheim on the right side. Because if that can work, then that changes your dynamic. Because one of your left shot guys, one of your left side defensemen, can now move to the right side. What does that mean for Ryan Ellis? I don't know that it means anything at this point. I don't know what the situation is there. I know there was a pseudo update that there really is no update from Saturday from Mike Yeo regarding Sanheim and Couturier. So not Sanheim, excuse me, Ellis and Couturier. So I don't know what the deal is there. I don't know that we see Ryan Ellis the rest of the year. We could. I'm not going to come out here and give you a hot take and say shut him down. I think that would be stupid. If he gets healthy enough to play, let him play. He plays. You get paid to play. If you're healthy, you play. Same thing with Couturier. I don't understand this notion of going, well, the season's lost, just shut him down. And maybe in the last couple of weeks or month, you do that. But geez, we're not even at the midway point yet of the season. And you want to shut guys down. Where's the upside in that? One of the things I want to talk to Sam about too, and I want to bring this up before he jumps on, is, yesterday, Sunday, it was actually cold enough here to get out on the ponds and skate. It's rare that happens. It seems like it happened more when we were younger. You could get out and play on the pond all day. But yesterday it was cold enough and the ponds were frozen. Buddy of mine, Matt Wendell, hit me up and said, we're going out tomorrow morning, Sunday morning at 9:30. I didn't make the 9:30, but me and my son and one of his teammates, Max, went out and hit the pond yesterday and we're playing. And it was awesome. The sound of playing on the pond, when you just hear that gook, 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 gook through the ice, and it just brought you back, and it made me think, oh shit, how did this sport get its hooks into me? So we're going to talk with Sam about that, and he joins us right now, formerly of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and now Philly Hockey Now. There he is, Sam Carchidi. Sam, how you doing?
Jason, how you doing? Good to be with you.
You as well. It's a good thing I have a radio background because I can just go, brother.
Whenever you're ready, I'm here.
Yeah, most people panic like there's no calls on the board. How's the new gig? How's Philly Hockey Now?
Yeah, it's doing well. So appreciate you mentioning it. We're trying to do a lot of different things, and we have comprehensive coverage of the Flyers. So so far so good. It's the company's really expanding. We're in 15 NHL cities now, and Philly happens to be one of them. So it's an exciting venture, and really looking forward to it.
Sam, how much different is it from just? Is it almost liberating in a way, coming from traditional, newspaper per se to a digital enterprise like this, which is, you can be a little bit more informal, if you will. Has it been a little bit liberating in that regard?
Yeah, I guess so. I have the right to be more opinionated, I guess. Whereas, when I'm covering the Flyers, I'm basically giving the news. They were really good to me. They did give me the freedom to write columns, which of course you can be opinionated on. But at Philly Hockey Now, they want a lot of opinions, and there's no filter. I'm basically the guy that runs the site, and so yeah, in that way, it is liberating and a little bit different. And but like I said, it's fun, and it's still hockey, and that's a good thing.
And you still, it's still the game on the ice that you're telling the stories about. Was it a bit bittersweet, the end of that chapter at the Inquirer, because you were there and you've been, a traditional journalist for very long?
Yeah, I actually started writing. I've been writing for the newspaper for 46 years.
Holy.
I was in college when I started, and I was just a freelancer for the Inquirer. I did mostly high school sports, and I did that for about 8.5 years, actually, and then it was hired full time. Then I did South Jersey high school sports, some Philadelphia high school sports, a lot of Phillies baseball. Got to cover a lot of big events with the Phillies, and been doing the Flyers for 14 years. So yeah, it was a great run. I have nothing but great things to say about the Inquirer. They were so good to me and my family. And the funny thing is that you build people say we're going to miss the relationships. As you know, when you're on the beat, the relationships you develop are more the people that you're with every day. And for a lot of years, it was the people on the high school beat or the people on the Phillies beat, and now the people on the Flyers beat, because you're very rarely in the office. I don't know how you are, but I'd say the last 5 years, I could count the times I was in the office on one hand, because you're always at events, and the events those arenas become your office, and as does your home, of course. But very rarely are you in the paper, and that's something that's really changed. When I first started there, I was in there every day, and you miss that camaraderie and the chatter, and you develop relationships. But things have changed dramatically, I'd say, over the last 15 years or so.
Well, that's the interesting thing, right? Because a lot of those guys that you have that camaraderie with at the games that you cover and whatever you're covering, they're also competitors.
Yep.
Which is an odd dynamic, but they become that's who you're grabbing meals with on the road, but they are competitors, right?
Yeah, no question, you're competitors, but you're friendly competitors. As you said, you go out to dinner on the road, and you go to each other's weddings, and you go to each other's the kids' birthday parties and that kind of thing. So
first Holy Communion.
Yeah, it is a strange dynamic, but it's a good one, and everybody makes it work, and we're all in this together. I always said years ago, by some I don't know if you know that name, but
Yeah.
Bison was the great broadcaster with the Phillies, and I
Hmm.
was there when he announced he was retiring. This is probably in '76, I believe, and he was retiring from broadcasting, and he goes way back to the Philadelphia A's and Eagles and so on and so forth. And one thing he said that really stuck with me, he said that I couldn't have done the job I did without the help of all the other people in the media and all the talks we had over the years and the friendships, and that really stuck with me. And Bai was a classy guy, and he was there, I guess, with the Phillies from the late '50s to the '70s. But
Yeah.
before that, he did the A's, and unfortunately for him, he was doing the Phillies, and then they switched him to the A's in 1950, and that's when they won their first pennant. So he missed that, and then he broadcast the Phillies all the way through, and they never won a pennant with him again. So,
Oh man.
uh, but uh, but a good man. But I always remember what he said, and it's so true that we're all in this together.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's why it felt so good to see Harry Callis and Merrill Reese call one, the
Oh
championship.
yeah, no
You know,
question. Yep,
those are the guys that are like the soundtrack to our youth in a lot of ways.
totally agree.
Sip, let me ask you about this team right now because oh man, um, a 10-game winless skid, and this is all following last year, which was obviously a cataclysmic disaster. But they go out and they make a ton of changes, and then we've already seen we're not even at the midway point. A 10-game winless skid, then a 7-game point streak, and now 7 straight losses. And who knows? They could get to 10 straight a 10-game winless streak again before the midway point of the season here. I mean, what have you seen out of this team through 36 games?
Yeah, I think you said it best when you said, "Oh man,"
Yeah.
because that really describes this team and this
Hmm.
season. It's been, for those who watched the Eagles' misery yesterday, it's been like that, for 30 some straight games or whatever we've played so far. And whether it's a slow start or a 10-minute stretch in a game where they collapse, it just seems like whatever can go wrong does go wrong. And yes, they've had a lot of injuries and COVID cases, but they won't use that as an excuse, and I don't think anybody will, because other teams in the league are in the same predicament. So
Yeah.
this team, unfortunately, the way it's built, does not have the roster depth to overcome all the injuries and illnesses, and especially a guy like Ryan Ellis, who to me is the leader of the defense. I mean, we saw, I think he played 4 games. We saw just in those 4 games what a difference he makes, not only for Ivan Provorov as a partner, but for this team. And, unfortunately, there's no timetable for his return. Yes, they miss Sean Couturier, there's no question, and they miss him a lot. But Ryan Ellis, to me, being out for so long has really crippled this team. And as I said, they don't have the depth to overcome it. And they're getting Rasmus Ristolainen back today, and that'll help them somewhat. And they're starting to get most of their pieces back. But to me, this is a big week for them. If they have any hope of making the playoffs, they play 4 games this week, 2 with the Islanders, but 4 games against teams that are sub 500. And I think they have to get at least 6 points this week at a minimum. And if they don't, it's time to rebuild. As some people will say, "Hey, it's time to rebuild right now." I'm one of them, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
I would bring Zamula in there after Yandel has his streak. Passes and becomes number one. Uh, I think it's time that he sits down. He's had an awful year, and I would bring Zamula up. I would play York. I would play
Frost.
Allison Frost. I mean, you
Yeah.
name it. That's the way I would go and find out what these kids can do. And sometimes when you do that, when you make changes, unexpectedly you start winning.
Yeah.
To parallel a different sport, the Phillies, when they traded Bobby Abreu, everybody said, "Hey, they gave up on the season." And if you remember, they went on a roll.
Yeah.
So sometimes you get younger and it injects some life and things turn the other way. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if it does, it's a plus. If it doesn't, the plus is you're giving these guys experience. So that's the way I would go and try to trade off some of these guys before the deadline. I think Claude Giroux is the guy that.
Oh, we lost Sam's signal there. We'll see if Sam gets back on. I think there he is. Well, he came and went. There you are.
Are you there? I lost you for a second.
Yeah, you were saying about trading off pieces. It's funny because if you go to the youth, and I think the math right now, Sam, just looks so daunting for them. I mean, you'd have to win it a 720% to even get close, and this team
I
hasn't shown
can't
that.
hear you, Jason. We lost the.
Oh, you lost
connection.
audio. Okay, so let me see if. I wonder why you lost audio. That is interesting.
Lost you.
All right, I'm gonna kick him out and log him back in. So I'll just text him and tell him to log back in. This is technology. This is a live show. This is what happens. But sometimes when you do that and you bring in the young players and you say, okay, we're playing for next year and we're going to see what we got, that releases the pressure. Can you hear me now, Sam?
Yeah, we're back now. For some reason, the sound just went, but I'm good now. I was talking about Bobby Abreu and how the Phillies actually revived their season when he left, and maybe that would happen if the Flyers made some moves, and if not, you're giving these guys experience. I don't know if you heard that or not, but
yeah. Well, the thing is with that, Sam, is you do that, and all of a sudden the pressure goes away of what it means in every game means in the standings, and you can play with a freedom. And this team clearly right now is in its own head. That's part of the equation as well. And to play young players, sometimes that's exactly what happens. You don't anticipate Giroux. I mean, I anticipate him having those conversations, probably already have, maybe not officially, through his agent and everything, about waiving his no move clause and probably finding a destination that makes sense for him and his family, and makes sense for the Flyers to try and come to a deal to go chase a cup, because he's given the team everything he could.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, it's a win-win situation for the Flyers and Giroux if he does waive his no trade clause, because the Flyers will get value. Hey, he's still a very good player, and he's leading the team in scoring, and he could be the missing piece for a contender, whether it's Toronto or somebody else. And I really think that the Flyers, in a way, owe it to Giroux to try to get him a cup, get him on a team that has a good chance to win a cup. So I think it's a win for Giroux. He can play for a team that has a shot to win it all, and it's a win for the Flyers because you could probably get a first-round pick and a quality prospect back for him, because he's a young 34. He just turned 34, but he's not showing his age at all. So and as you said, he's had a superb career with the Flyers. He's obviously a Flyers Hall of Famer for the team. And he's probably you can make a strong case that he deserves to be a hockey Hall of Famer if he has a couple more strong years, which I think he will have. So he's a borderline Hall of Famer right now, but he's got a good shot.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are astounding when you consider he's never played with a pure goal scorer. The thing is, too, Sam, with him, that ups his value in this rental market is that he's a guy, and I'll knock on wood, he doesn't miss games. He's only missed because of COVID. I mean, his availability is the most important element for an athlete to have. Doesn't matter how good you are if you're not available. But boy, he answers the bell. He plays, misses very few games throughout his career. And that's another thing. If you're trading for him, you got a guy that's going to be in the damn lineup.
And you got a guy that can play in all situations, penalty kill, power play. He's in the top 3 in faceoffs every year. And he's probably going to score 25 goals this year and give you 55 points or 60 points or so. And he's been a captain for about a decade now. So, the leadership is there. So, he knows what it takes. But to my way of thinking, and people get on, well, he's never won a cup. Well, to my way of thinking, they've never surrounded him with the talent. And it's a shame. They did come close in 2010. Giroux was a youngster then, but, played a big part in that run to the Stanley Cup final, but they haven't had much of a run since then, as you well know. So they really haven't surrounded him with the talent. I mean, that year in 2010, of course, he was like a third line center. That was a year you had Richards and Carter and Briere could play center or wing, and Giroux. I mean, think of that lineup. That was a powerful lineup. They underachieved most of that year, and they barely got in the playoffs, but then they put it together, as you know, in the playoffs.
Yeah, and you have Chris Pronger and Chemo Timonen as your linchpins on the blue line. I mean, you need an absolute team to have success in this league at in the playoffs. And I look at like Edmonton, and you look at all the number one overall picks and the talent they have, but they don't have a team that can win, and they don't have the goaltending. I think the other thing with Giroux too, Sam, is he goes to another city and he's not wearing that C on his jersey, and he can go there and just play hockey. Like some people go, well, let him go. You trade him, you get something for him, then he can sign back here in the offseason. Very rarely see that happen.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if that happened, but it's not out of the question. I mean, his family has some roots here, deep roots. He's got 2 young kids now, and but I guess it depends. It's just a shame, from his perspective, that Ottawa would be the perfect spot if the Senators were a contender, but of course they're far from it. Because that he would have the best of both worlds, because he would be going home, because he makes his home there in the off season. But like you said, it's a possibility. But how often does it happen? Maybe 3% of the time, where somebody goes somewhere and then comes back as a free agent the next year. It doesn't happen too much. But I guess it all depends where he goes and how comfortable he fits in, and what the team does. I mean, if he goes to, I mentioned Toronto before. If he goes to Toronto and the Leafs win a cup, well, then maybe he wants to come back and try to win one with the Flyers. That would be interesting.
Yeah, check a big box if that happens.
Yeah. So, but to me, he's by far their number one trading piece at the deadline or a little before. There are other guys. They have
Braun.
Martin Jones, maybe a piece. James Van Riemsdyk, maybe a piece. A lot of guys. Derek Brassard, if he ever gets healthy, could be a piece. Guys that can get you, mid to late picks. You're not going to get early round picks for those guys, but I think it's time to stock up the farm system, because the farm system, albeit the 9-game point streak the Phantoms put up, they have mostly veterans. They don't have a lot of great quality prospects there right now, because most of those guys are here. And the farm system is down right now, and I think they could really use some more draft picks.
Yeah, were you surprised last week on the Cam and Strick podcast when Bob Clark went full double bazookas on Ron Hextall's drafting, not just the Nolan Patrick, but in general?
Yeah, I was.
I was shocked.
Yeah, I did. I don't know what good it did. The only thing I can think of, and I tried to. I texted Clarky and usually good about getting back to me, but he didn't get back to me. I wanted to see if you wanted to talk about it, because sometimes things get lost in translation, and but he didn't respond. So to me, I think maybe he was trying to take some of the pressure off of Chuck Fletcher, because if the Flyers don't make the playoffs this year, and they're certainly a long shot, it'll be the first time since 92, 93, 93, 94 that they missed the playoffs in 2 consecutive years. And maybe he's trying to take some of the eyes off of Fletcher and what has transpired here. And I'm not saying it's all Fletcher's fault, but he will become a central figure in this if they do not make the playoffs. And and now Clarkie's saying that this is what Ron Hextall did. This is what he left us with. And ironically, if you remember, the first day Chuck Fletcher was in a press conference here after he was hired, he went out of his way and complimented Ron Hextall for leaving him a great farm system.
Yeah.
So, if you listened or read the comments made by Bob Clark, I think he exaggerated. Did Hextall do a great job here? No, I don't think he did. But if you listen to Clark, he makes it seem like his first round picks, especially, were a disaster. They were not. I mean, he's picked, Provorov and Konechny and Farabee. He's picked some good players. Some of them have had down years. Sanheim and it has not been a disaster. I mean, Carter Hart, who was not a first round pick, but I think overall he probably is like a C plus. But if you listen to Clark, he just painted it with broad strokes and made it seem like Hextall was a disaster, and that's really not fair.
Yeah, I think you always have to consider someone's comments with the motivation behind those comments. We know he's close with the Fletcher family, Cliff Fletcher, Chuck's dad, and probably trying to displace the blame to a predecessor. It's just shocking to see a guy that when he was the Hextall played for him when Clarkey was a general manager in his first stint with the Flyers, and a guy that he loved as a player. But I was a little taken back by it. Going, wow, that's interesting. But it's never dull. Let me ask you about covering a few guys over the years. You mentioned 14 years. You took over for Les Bowen?
No, I took over for Tim Panaccio.
Oh, that's right. When Panach went to CSN.
Correct.
Okay. But let's talk about a few guys that you covered, and I'm just going to kind of give you some names and your thoughts on what it was like to cover them. Let's start out with Jake Voracek, because it was just a couple of days ago, January 15th, 2021, when we had that Mike Sealski press conference and Travis Konechny sitting alongside him. What was it like to cover Jake Voracek, though, for you?
Jake was very colorful and engaging, and I really enjoyed covering him for 9 years anyway. I think he was there 10 years. The 10th year, he got kind of strange, and Jake was a different person, I would say, over the last year. And, he just, one time he just flipped out at me in the locker room about something that I had tweeted, and he had it all wrong. He had all the information wrong. And I tried to explain to him what happened, and he walked away. I mean, so he was great for reporters. I'll tell you that. He was,
he said
very
something.
colorful. He would always, say something off the wall, and he wasn't. Some of these guys talk with are just very defensive and are afraid to say anything. And but he was very open, which I really loved about him. But the last year, he just I don't know. He was just on a different plane, and just wasn't the same Jake. And I even texted him, and I had a really good relationship with him, I would say, for most of the time. And I would text him and congratulate him on something that happened, like the birth of one of his kids or whatever. And I when he was traded, I actually texted him and congratulated him and wish him good luck in Columbus. He'd always tell me the best spots to go to in Columbus. So we had a really good relationship, but he never responded. So that's something, and I'm still not sure what actually happened there. Maybe he got burnt by something on Twitter. I don't really follow him, on Twitter, and I know he got in Twitter wars with a lot of people, and I have no idea really. But
he was a notorious blocker.
Yeah, and his personality changed in the last year, and I think it was an indication that he was fed up with being here. That's the way I read it. That may not be true, but I think he kind of welcomed getting out of here. That's just the impression that I got, and so it'll be interesting when the Flyers get to play the Blue Jackets and
Thursday.
Yeah, it's coming up, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you about covering Chris Pronger, because we know that there's not a microphone or camera he doesn't like.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a story. I don't think I've ever told this. Chris and I had a great relationship, but there was one time where the Flyers were hiding one of his injuries. Would not say what it was, and wouldn't even give a hint of it. And so I actually called Chris's doctor, and just to get an idea, because at the time we weren't sure if he was going to miss the whole season. We really didn't know the severity of it. So Pronger was not happy when that was relayed back to him. And actually, we were in Columbus. Speaking of Columbus, we were in Columbus, and he chewed me out, and he said, "In there," and he put me in a little room, and it was just me and him, and he locked the door, and he screamed at me for about 15 minutes. Don't you know about HIPAA rules? Don't you understand? And he went on and on, and he screamed for 15 minutes, and I just said, "Are you done?" And he looked at me, and I said, "Are we good now?" And he says, "We're good, but you no longer get the first question." Like, in other words, at a press conference, you can't have the first question. And I said, "Okay," and we shook hands, and that was it. But that was Chris Pronger. He was a beauty. I mean, I love Pronger. I love the way he played. I love the intensity, and I love I loved how he challenged his teammates, and just a great leader, tremendous leader. One of the best leaders I've ever seen. Yeah. And like I said, spoke his mind, but again, like Voracek for most of his career here, was didn't talk in cliches. Really, when he talked, it was something meaningful. And his number is actually being retired by the Blues tonight in St.
Yeah.
Louis. So and he had a great career, and of course, a big portion of it was with the Blues. So I'm really happy for him and wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, he's a guy that to me that should end up back in hockey. I know he's got a venture going on now, and but he was so mean on the ice. Like guys hated playing against him because he wasn't just a competitor. He carved your eyeballs out when you weren't looking.
Yeah,
You know?
I used to call him Captain Snarl because he
Yep.
brought that snarl all the time, and you don't see enough of that in the game today. You really don't.
Totally agree. Totally agree. He's the only guy, Sam, that came out after Game 6 when that puck goes in the net against Chicago in the final that came out and did radio and talked to me.
Is that right?
Yeah, he just, he was a stand-up guy, and he came out and said, we didn't get it done, but and he came out and spoke, and that's the kind of guy that he was, and I loved covering him. I had a blast with him because he'd give it to you too.
Yeah, he was tremendous. It reminds me, I covered the Phillies World Series in '93, and of course, everybody remembers Mitch Williams and what happened with Joe Carter, and Mitch was the same way. He came out and was a stand-up guy, and talked about it at length, and you always remember those type of things. The guys that
yep, it's character.
When it's really tough for them, and they show that character.
Yeah. Let me ask you about Richards and Carter. I'll put them kind of pseudo together.
Yeah, they were kind of strange dynamic,
yep.
To say the least. Really sad the way Richards' career ended, and because he was a heart and soul guy. He gave it his all on the ice, and he had a little bit of Pronger in him, and he had that a little Bobby Clark in him, the way he played on the ice.
He was a winner.
And it's a shame that his career was cut short, and a lot of off ice problems, which we don't have to get into, but because he was a hockey player, and I mean that with as a full compliment. I mean, some guys just go through the motions, but he was a hockey player in the true sense.
Oh, damn, we just lost Sam once again. I don't know. Sam's got the AOL dial-up moving. Maybe Richards cut the cord on Sam's internet connection there. That was mid-sentence that Sam got interrupted on Mike Richards. There he's back now. Is Richards over there cutting your internet?
Yeah, I think he just took a hockey stick to these wires here. What had happened was I got a message from somebody, and it cut off the thing, but apologize for that. But I start to say Jeff Carter was probably one of the best goal scorers I've seen, natural goal scorers for the Flyers anyway. I don't think the Flyers, I'm not so sure they've had a better natural goal scorer since he left. I know he scored 46 goals here one year, and the Flyers really haven't had a true sniper. I may be forgetting somebody, but a guy I call a true sniper since then, and that's one of their biggest problems. I mean, and Carter is still putting up good numbers. He's been in and out of the Penguins lineup because of injuries, but he's another guy. We talked about Giroux being a potential Hall of Famer. Jeff Carter is a potential Hall of Famer. If he has a couple more real strong years, you can make an argument for him. I'm not saying he's definitely going to go in, but at least he's under consideration. There's no question. And Carter and Richards both got in some trouble here. I know Paul Holmgren was always getting on them to keep their lifestyle in order, and I think everybody saw the pictures of them at frat parties at Temple and other places. But Jeff Carter really matured, and he's a great family guy now, and he's got kids, and I think having a family and having kids really put his life in order, and he's been terrific, and he's won some Stanley Cups and
gold medal.
Flyers miss him, that's for sure. But again, the trades they made, they did well in what they got for both of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at Carter, and you got Voracek and a draft pick that turned out to be Couture. With Richards, you got Shen, and Simmons and which ended up being Farabee and Frost and so it keeps on giving. So the Flyers got good quality in return. And some people I see on Twitter saying they were horrible trades. Those guys all won cups, but they wouldn't have won a cup here, not with what surrounded them. Yeah. So I think I think the Flyers actually did well in those trades, and of course Carter ended up going to Columbus and then got traded. A lot of people forget that.
Well, he forced his way to LA.
To the Kings. Right.
Yeah, I mean, he helped put that Kings in that 2012 Cup team over the top. He was a deadline acquisition from Columbus to LA that year. And of course, he's still on the contract that the Flyers signed him to 12 years ago. It's insane. Finally, the last year of that deal. It's funny, those two guys, if I had a microphone or we were on the air, it was like pulling teeth to get anything. But as soon as I was standing there without a microphone or hanging out in my locker room where I work in NBA One, those two would come in and just break your balls. They were great. But as soon as I had that microphone, it was like, I'm going to suck on the air so you don't ask me to do it anymore.
Yeah. They did not like to talk, especially Richards. They did not like to talk, and they would hide in the dressing room. And Carter has gotten better as the years have gone on, but it was really pulling teeth. I agree with you.
Last name for you, Steve Mason. What was he like to cover? Because Mason could be a little.
Yeah, Mason was great. I mean, great guy. I did a big story on him when he came here and talked to his parents. They lived outside Toronto and met up with him. Met them right outside the arena there in Toronto. We had some great chats. Really good people, quality people. I think Mason got a bad rap here. I think he was a better goalie. And you look at his numbers.
Yeah, they were good.
His numbers were good here. Yeah. I mean, were they great? No, they were good to very good. And he kept them in that series against the Rangers that they lost in 7 games. And, I think some of his teammates were a little down on him because he was the kind of guy that was not shy from throwing somebody under the bus. If there was a defensive breakdown and a goal was scored, he would point that out without maybe even naming the names, but you kind of knew who was behind it. So I don't think he was a beloved guy in the locker room, but to me, for the media, he was great. He was honest, good player, never quite lived up to his expectations of his tremendous rookie year with the Columbus Blue Jackets, but very good goalie. Was surprised he retired so young, to be honest.
Yeah.
And good guy, good family, and he's probably one of the better goalies the Flyers have actually had in the last 10 years or so. And Carter Hart's got a chance to be, a lot better than him. He still has to prove it. But again, getting back to the defense, this defense in front of the goalies has to get better, and they will when Ryan Ellis gets back. The big question is when.
Yeah, environment matters for goaltenders. The thing about Mace, he was such a competitor. I don't think he could envision himself moving into a tandem or a backup role. And there's a lot of money to be made in that role. Look at Martin Jones making $2 million, playing at a third of the games that he played the last 10 years in the league. But I don't think Mace could ever wrap his head around being that guy, and it found its way out of the league real quick as a result of that. Sam, best of luck with Philly Hockey Now. www.phillyhockeynow.com, and of course at Broad Street Bull on Twitter. Still the same Twitter handle, right?
You got it. I appreciate it, and I'll see you at the rink. But always appreciate the time, Jason. Sorry we had a little bit of a problem connecting there.
No worries at all. I appreciate you doing it, Sam, and we'll see you at the rink. And Flyers Islanders tonight. You can check out the website Philly Hockey Now and get Sam's coverage there as well. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Jason. Happy New Year.
There he is. Sam Carchidi joins us on the Parks Sportsbook presents Stick to Hockey Live. Let me tell you about Parks, because we're going to put a wrap on the episode, and Parks is great, and the Sportsbook app is fantastic. So easy to use, so easy to navigate. Flyers a big dog tonight. Hey, if you haven't gotten in on it, just download the app, open an account, deposit. If you lose, your first bet is risk-free up to $500. Risk-free up to $500. So make sure you get the app. Get in on the action and check out all the different ways to bet. Again, it's not just spreads and puck lines or, money lines. It's so much more now. Play-by-play betting is awesome. Live in-game betting, player performances, props, teasers. You got the same game parlays and combination bets, all kinds of interesting things you can do. If you can dream it, you can probably bet it. So check it out. Park Sportsbook, get the app, and your first bet will be risk-free. Again, no promo required, just deposit. And if you lose your first bet, risk-free up to $500. And give them a follow on the social channels as well. At Park Sportsbook on Twitter. They're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can get all of our past content there, past episodes, including the OGs podcast with Harry Mays, which will have another new episode coming up tomorrow. Harry and I, and you can also get, Rich Gannon's stuff on there, Mike Quick and Natalie and Sam, and everybody's stuff is all there on all the social channels. So make sure you check it out and follow those as well. Daily specials, and get in on the action. They're a great local company, easy deposits, fast payouts, the whole thing. So again, get the Park Sportsbook app and get in on the action and get that $500 risk-free bet. No promo required. Just deposit and get going. Open up your account and you're good to go. Even if you're using another service now, I implore you to check out Parks and support a local company to boot. But that's going to put a wrap on this episode of Park Sportsbook Presents Stick to Hockey Live. We'll have another brand new one coming up on Thursday, leading into the return of Jake Voracek here to Philadelphia when the Flyers take on the Columbus Blue Jackets. In the meantime, though, they'll have the Islanders tonight in New York, tomorrow against the Islanders at Wells Fargo, and then Thursday against the Columbus Blue Jackets at Wells Fargo as well. And the return of the newly 1,000 games played Jake Voracek. But everybody, have a great day. Have a great Monday. We'll talk to you on Thursday's episode of Park Sportsbook Presents Stick to Hockey Live.